Well, Bill had said that you wanted me to talk in the beginning a little bit about working with performing artists in terms of the books.
Hi, my name is Bill Ritchie. The Book Arts Guild in Seattle and the University of Washington Library invited Claire Van Vliet to visit. The students at the printmaking classes at the art school at the university sponsored a demonstration while she was here, and it's shown in this edited videotape. Claire Van Vliet is an artist and a craftswoman, publisher, designer, and bookbinder, and she is the owner of Janus Press in Westbrook, Vermont. She brought books with her to show the students. She spoke on book design and illustration and about her experiences working with performing artists. She also described some aspects of the business and grants in her experience. Besides these, she shared her observations on the aesthetics of books and their binding, plus her views on education. One of the main reasons the students wanted to have her was that she could show them the technique of relief etching, which she did after her presentation on books. This videotape will include more excerpts from Miss Van Vliet's lecture, inserted throughout this tape of the technical demonstration. First, here's Claire Van Vliet with a description of a sampling of books from the Janus Press.
A book like this one, which is a bread and puppet, it's called This Is. It's a play on the Cuban Missile Crisis, and was printed offset. Peter Schumann did the drawings, pen and ink drawings, and then scratched in the text where he wanted it to go, and then I set it in type, took reproduction proofs, pasted up the book, and had it printed offset. I thought I'd show you a couple of other books with just some approaches to illustration. There are several ways in which you can work on illustration of a text. One of them is simply to stick the picture in. It may work very well. In this particular book, which is Widow Poems, the design of the book is predicated on the longest poem. And then the illustration, which is a color Xerox by Ray Metzger, who's a photographer, is rather, instead of a frontispiece, it's a, I don't know, what do you call that, an endispiece? This book is one where the illustrations are totally integrated with the text. This is a hand-colored version of a book that I was having a lot of fun with. And I think that's something to realize, too, is that, you can just fool around on some of your books sometimes. And I would like to have the opportunity now to do more of this kind of thing. Because not only would I like to have a Xerox machine, I would really love to have a Heidelberg offset. But I'm a realist. I want the Heidelberg offset with Pressman. And sometimes the illustration a book can be kind of basically unillustratable. And this one is, it's little poems, and it's about red flowers and sunsets and things like that. And and it's called Seasons. So I had a friend of mine commission the illustration for that one. So you guys can look through these. So let's see. Oh, and then I'll show you one that's just real pretty. This is about the Provence at noon in the summertime, and it's a poem by LeConte de Lisle, translated by John Theobald, and I made a paperwork for it. The paper was pigmented when I placed it. I made it in the pulp process. When you sit and hold this in your lap and you come to it, the French is first, is that you sit there and hold it in your lap. You feel like the field is all the way around you. This is one other book, just a quickie through that. That's one of the things that's an advantage when you're doing books is to get all the type set first and then fill in the holes for the pictures. I set this type and I knew that picture needed to be this size. Another thing that I do for visual serenity on the books is I do things like, here's the dedication, the contents, and the colophon, which is the description of the book, just all stuffed onto one page. Now, a book that I'm working on now got the National Book Award in 1935, The Circus of Dr. Lau, and has been in print since then until just a little over a year ago. This one is illustrated with relief etchings, which is the process I'm going to demonstrate. This book has 43 relief etchings. 7 of them are double-page spreads, and it's going to be printed at the Steinauer Press in Lunenburg, Vermont, in an edition of 2000. So I'm hoping that we can bring it back into print as a paperback. How about it? An illustrated paperback? Sometimes, you know, it's hard to have the illustrations work in with the text, and so you just simply say, this is text and this is illustration, and let it go at that. Let them be just sort of shoulder to shoulder, not holding hands at all. This one, can you guess what the subject of this one is? It's from a housewife's diary. I would like that the stage was set that as soon as I pick this up, you know, I grin because it's a funny book. That means I'm serving the communication in the form of the book. Okay, well, I think we ought to do our demonstration, and then we can talk afterwards if you want about various and sundries. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is clean the plate.
Use Ajax.
Actually, probably the best one to use is Bonamy. Well. It's necessary to degrease the plate so that the asphaltum will not be refused by the oil that's left on the surface of the plate when it's rolled. This is cold rolled metal. And I use a cleanser. If it's important to keep the plate very, very smooth, you use whiting and ammonia. But that's kind of hard on the sinuses. Now the way to find out if the plate is clean is if the water will stay sheeted on the plate. This plate is backed with a acid resist. We'll end up putting that in position there, and I think I'll probably work from this side, so we'll just do it. Is that still plugged in? Alrighty, good, okay. Good. Alright, now what we're going to do is put our textures on. What kind of ink is this?
It's a relief printing ink.
Good.
It's a Dan Smith traditional relief.
Okay.
That's it's a plastic, polyurethane roller. Not gelatin.
The best one that I've found is, I don't know whether they still make it, is the PVC, polyvinyl chloride. Very, very nasty, but very stable. And I've had the rollers for years. You need, this is like any texture print, you need lots of ink.
We were going to try and experiment with inking up the letters. I brought in some rubber stamp letters. The problem is you have to be able to transfer enough ink to get it sticky. And so I don't know whether this will work.
Oh, I think that'll work. We'll just get a bunch of things inked up here. What shall we say? We've got all kinds of letters here.
Say wow.
All right, shall we say wow? All right, we can say wow. All right, we're going to need to do it this way. Of course, wow, it won't make any difference if it's backwards.
That's right.
Or upside down.
And if it's upside down, it'll say mom. Trouble is, we gotta have two W's or two M's, and that's all we have one.
Well, they could be done directly, but I will do it so that you can see what it's what it will be like if we transfer it. In other words, offset it onto the plate. Peter Schumann, who is the guiding light of Bread and Puppet Theater, was trained as a sculptor, and as many sculptors are, he's also likes to do relief prints, which is really a form of bas-relief. I think that sculptors and printmakers are pretty sympathetic mediums for each other. I think printmakers in general have this thing. You see, if you don't know what to do next, there's always this large white area that has to be lovingly cleared away. Or there's always the plates that need to be filed, or there's the lithostones that you can endlessly grind. And the lithostone, I love to file the lithostones. I'm always in there caressing them, rounding them off, and all of those things. So I think that the temperament that goes with the printmaker is the temperament that likes these periods of handwork that give you a chance for the decisions to grow while your hands are busy, rather than standing there and facing the universe in front of a blank canvas every day. So that it's more a matter of temperament than anything else, I think.
So it doesn't have to go through the press. Doesn't have to go through the press?
No? That way you can use it as a drawing medium too, you see. Whereas if it went through the press, it wouldn't have those variations.
Right.
Yeah. Let's make a mess. You have to have lots of these because this is the dirty side. Okay.
Is that just a wax paper?
No, this is polyethylene. It can be wax paper. Not to forget this. Still got the image there too. Got to keep track of which side's the dirty side.
Oh.
This is perfect for a little animal skin.
Can you use other inks, like lithograph inks, or
Sure,
just any sticky ink?
anything sticky. You can't rub this because it'll just make it mushy, because it's a soft texture.
We'll push it around.
It'll push it around, see? See how much there is on there already. And if you had rubbed back and forth, it would have just made it mushy. Now, you know, stencil printing can be very, very simple. But you don't have to go through a whole press process to get a texture or even a color onto a plate, or even onto a print. You can just roll straight through onto the paper. Now, let's see, what else have we got here? Ooh, I wish I'd had that for my goldfish. Now, there's a lot of things you can do. Perfect snakes. I wish I'd had that for the Medusa in the Circus of Dr. Lau. Isn't that I just and I let it move along a little. All right, now then, remember, this is the way no one will ever be able to forge your work. And if you don't lift it all the way up, you can check to make sure you've got enough image. You could always drop it back down again if it needs to be. By this time your hands are pretty dirty, so you want to always use that polyethylene to support everything so that you don't start making all kinds of smudges on the plate that you don't want. See, that didn't, it's a lot of textures that don't quite do what you think they're going to do. I don't think this is too much relief on that to do to get us anything really interesting. So what we might try here is seeing what will happen if we do just a little buildup of something. If you ever wanted to put your potato printing to good use. I mean, there's nothing wrong with cutting all kinds of things and putting them on here. They only really need to be used once for this. And we're not going to etch it away that much, so what I would like to do is, do you have asphalt and varnish too? Good, so then I'll do some drawing on it as well. Okay, good. So then this will be just fine. I'll fill in with drawing. Now at this point, what we do is take powdered asphaltum, which can be used over and over again. I need a soft brush. Do you have a real soft brush? Forgot to ask you for that. What I use is what's called a varnish brush. It's a wide, soft brush. And I use also one of those Japanese wash brushes. This technique actually is not really mysterious. This is the standard technique that was used in the photo engraving industry for supporting the image. They would do it 6 times through the etching, and it would allow them to end up with, instead of undercutting, a pyramid-shaped cross-section. It's good to know your trade. I think one of our essential problems in our education as artists is that we've gotten to the point where too many people are taught by people who only learned it from people who taught, and you know, there hasn't ever been an input from the trade. There's a lot going out there in the trade, and this is just a standard trade technique. Unfortunately, the trade doesn't do this anymore either. So it starts becoming that you start hunting around in the old journals. You don't need much, and you save it. And what I do when I do this is I'll do one texture and go through this process and then ink it up and do another texture so that I can have them going over each other. And have it cooling in between. So you save it. Do you have well, I guess I can handle it here with this. Now you wait until it turns shiny. There, now it's starting to. It's okay. See, it's becoming like a baked enamel on there. Okay, that'll be it. And I need, I guess, something under this that we can set it down on.
Or just set it right down.
Won't it?
Won't scorch.
Now this is indeed the bad stuff. This is benzol. And now I need a drawing brush. Okay, that's just asphaltum varnish that's been thinned with lighter fluid on the warm plate. I think that when this plate cools that will probably be stiff enough to go in the acid. The advantage of drawing when it's the plate's warm. Also, asphaltum tends to be very brittle, and if you warm your plate up, you'll find that you will be able to draw into it without it chipping off. Now, if you want to draw with a sharp tool into this, you can at this point. See, this is the point when you can draw back into it without having it chip. The asphaltum has definitely a tendency to chip, so that if you want to draw back into it, this is a good time to do it while the plate is lukewarm. And this is where you might do some repairs too, and also figure out maybe you want a line in something like this. Now this stuff will chip, but that can be used to your advantage. Now, is this class got lithographers in it?
Yeah.
A little rubbing ink, please.
Rubbing inks.
Soft litho crayon would be fine. The one thing to remember in any of the graphic media is the fact that you're working with black. And the thing that makes shades between black and white is not the fact that the black is not black and the white is not white, but is the shape of each. So you build up textures that have different shapes. And that way you avoid that collograph quality of it being black, a white, and gray. Because relief etchings have the same tendency to have that unrelenting midtone that is all the same. So one way you avoid that is by building up textures. So you can deepen what you've already gotten by adding this. Because the texture will pull it off more. One reason I'm filling up the plate so much is we're not going to have very long to etch it. And you know, as if you leave wide areas, you get what's called crevé, which means that the lowered area also prints. All right. So why don't we try that in the acid? Is this the water here?
That's pure water.
It makes a tremendous difference on whether you have fresh acid or not. What happens is you get the zinc suspended in there, and it doesn't it just doesn't bite as clean. I think we'll do a 5-to-1 for this. Be a half a cup. Is that right? Doesn't look right according to this. Yeah, it is. Then you always add the acid to the water, not the other way around, but you can take a small amount, which I'm going to do right now, so that you clean out your container and add that. See how it smokes, just adding that to, because it's very dangerous to do it the other way around. Now agitate it slightly here to get it mixed, and put the plate in the acid. Wish I had a feather, because this doesn't really release the air bubbles as well. This will take a lot longer. That's why you don't want to use very much acid, because you do the agitation or the feather. Actually, this agitation is probably the best way to do it, because it's the feather can scratch the surface. Yeah. And like any etching, you have to realize that it'll be undercut some. And at this point, I would take it out and protect some of these areas probably. Crayon is a real good thing at this point to support some things with, because the crayon would just catch on the textures. It certainly is nasty. If you wanted to do some very fine lines in something, what I would suggest is that you do your basic etching and then pull it out and draw them in for like your last 5 minutes of etch, rather than doing it the other way around. Blech. No, it's okay. I'm going to move it over closer to the fan. I've only worked really with one performing arts group, and that's the Bread and Puppet Theater. And what has happened is that Peter Schumann, who is the guiding light of Bread and Puppet Theater, has always done all of the graphic work that goes with the Bread and Puppet Theater. And I asked him, and always made little books, little ones that they just printed offset on sheets of 8.5 by 11, and folded them and ended up with, little books like that they sell for 25 cents at the performances. And so we got together on making some larger books. So here's the what we did with Bread and Puppet in terms of sort of like the general availability. One of the things I'll tell you about performing artists, they're always on the road. If they're good at what they're doing, that a performance means that you're moving around. There's no way in which you can capture their performance. But what you can do is simply say, well, we're going to make a book of this, and perhaps you can't think in terms of translation. I tried to in this one, and I must say, quite honestly, that the book, as powerful as it is, even when you look at it, listening to the record, does not come close to the experience of the performance. All I could try to do was to do something that had its own integrity rather than to do something that really tried to capture the performance. And so what you do is you use the reality of the medium. And so I think that strong results would come. I would really encourage, artists to become more and more involved with theater. Certainly, the few times that like Chagall and particularly Picasso, Noguchi, yeah, when it's happened, it's been outstanding. And the Alwyn Nikolai Avery is really outstanding. So that when it does happen, it works wonderfully, because stage designers don't have generally a very good sense of design and color. They know how the lights work, but they don't have a strong art background, and very seldom do they have a very good sense of form. One of the things that the performing arts really needs a lot of help on is their graphics. A lot. Not only that, but that makes a big difference. A friend of mine did the graphics for the Berkshire Theater Festival, and they were very successful, and then for 2 years he didn't do it. They just had the local printer basically do it, and they did it themselves. And the drop-off in their attendance was incredible. So that if you're interested in it, I would advise you to sharpen your elbows and wade in there, because you might find you're very welcome. Okay, I think I'm going to wash it off now. Take it out of the acid. Now, I'm going to need some solvent. I use paint thinner. Yeah, I probably don't need that. I'll try the kerosene. I usually use mineral spirits, which is what paint thinner is. Are you guys, hey, I need a plug. Huh? Okay. Do you have newspapers? This stuff does not come off very easily, as you can see. Well, the litho crayon doesn't love it, and the asphaltum is baked on. I'd say use that only as a last resort. Well, no, it's not hurt the plate, but it's real bad for you. for me, doing the books with Bread and Puppet have usually meant that the distribution problems of bookmaking were solved, so that I was able to do books that were in larger editions when I worked with them. Because for me, my sensibility, my temperament needs the time that comes with the handwork involved in all the processes of bookmaking in order to arrive at the decisions. And so that means you don't have very much time for promotion and for marketing. And so that leads to a basic conflict. Either you like the marketing, editorial marketing promotional aspect, in which case you should be a pure publisher that's buying services from handworkers or from printers, typesetters, bookbinders, and all that kind of thing. Or if you like the actual process, then you have to realize that you better keep the marketing aspect down to a minimum, because you're not going to have time to do it. And silly for you to go ahead and make an edition of 500 if you don't have the time to sell 500. Well, one of the advantages of working with performing artists is that they have marketing capability that is extraordinary, because they are in contact with the public all the time, and they want to sell their records, they want to sell their books, they want to sell their documents, and they give a performance in a different, they're always on the road, and they have all this stuff out in the lobby, and so that they have the marketing possibility that as a isolated printer working alone by choice, you don't simply have. So the working with the Bread and Puppet has usually meant that my editions have been quite different than the editions that I've done when I do them only for myself or for the Janus Press. Now, a book that I'm working on now for the Limited Editions Club, which I hope is going to be a kind of a new direction, is that was very common in the 20s and 30s to have artists who weren't even necessarily book artists do editions for the Limited Editions Club, and that's of course what we'd all like to do. They're only limited because that's how long that's what makes it possible. You know, you've got enough money to buy paper for 150 copies, and and you figure I've got enough energy to try and sell 150 copies before I run out of energy and want desperately to be doing my next idea. I think a lot of this has to depend on how fast your ideas grow. That sometimes it's better to do something on a small scale, because then it gets done, and that process of finishing up is not too frustratingly long, because all of us, somewhere around halfway through the project, we are already on the next project in our minds. So it's really important to bite off chewable chunks. Now, where's the safety cam? And this can go in there too. Now, there's one more process here, which is I wash this now with water before I try to ink it up, because your solvent's pretty greasy. And you'll find that it will resist, particularly with relief etching, you might get a halo around your image because of the oil that's still down along the edges of the image from the solvent. So I just run this under water here and clean off the plate. What did you know is always itch when your hands are dirty? Now that's a service that's never been offered before. Isn't that elegant? Now, you can really control how much of this will print by how heavily you run the roller over it, of course. But I'm just letting the weight of the roller do it. I'm not pressing down on it, I'm just letting the weight of the roller. You don't need nearly as much ink on here as you would say use for a normal woodcut, because it's going to be printed on dampened paper, and will be printed in an etching press. And it's a good idea to add it, have your ink thin, and go over it numerous times, instead of, you know, trying to get it all in one whack. There we are. You may want to clean the edges or not clean the edges, depending. So we'll take it over here. What I do when I'm doing production on this kind of thing is I just have a stack of newsprint there, and I would throw that sheet away because the roller goes over the edge of the newsprint. And then the first print of this, I'll mark the place the plate goes, so that if the plate gets dirt on the back of it, the plate always goes back into the same position on the press. Now, is the press set up for etching plates at this? Okay, we could. Yeah, it might be a little tight. We might lose it might pull the paper apart. So if you just loosen it just slightly. Okay. Blankets here. What is this your?
That's the size of it.
Let's see, will they stay in position there? Okay. Now we're still getting some haze from the residue of the solvent, but the next one should be better. Well, I don't think that we should use up good paper on this. This is enough.
Sandy needs one for the library.
Okay, let's see if we can get one without the haze. So, no need to clean the plate in between. Now, this is a kind of an interesting printing publishing project. It's funded by the National Endowment for the Arts Literature Program, which does fund theater publications as well as poetry and prose. And when I do something under a National Endowment for the Arts grant, I like to think of doing something first of all, that wouldn't get done otherwise, and I like it to be as accessible as possible. And so this was done in an edition of 3,500. So basically what I become is a conduit for the grant, because the printing costs were about $4,000 on this one. And I was simply paid for doing all of the design and the paste up by the fact that I made 150 of them in a hardcover edition, which makes the book possible for libraries to buy. What happened was that Peter usually does a thing like this that goes with each of the major productions that Bread and Puppet does. He usually does write out the play, and it usually gets printed in one of these little mini thrown together quick offset, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The books don't have to be elegantly printed letterpress to be good books. So you can look at that one. That one is your tax dollars at work, which means you can buy that book for $3.50 from the Bread and Puppet Theater. Now another one that we did together, funded by the National Endowment. The reason it's this shape is that it has a recording in it. So here's the what we did with like the general availability. And again, I used the grant money to do something that would, however, anytime you decide to go off the deep end and do something you need to do out of inner necessity, don't expect anyone to be at the bottom of the cliff to act as a cushion. You have to jump off quite realistically, and because you want to do it.
Place in a shop in Issaquah.
Now, what have we got here?
And there's Stonehenge hand.
Oh, I've never tried Stonehenge. Let's do that.
It's a Stonehenge after all. Nice technique.
Good and crooked. No, it wasn't enough pressure that time. Well, I think we should take one more proof. This was also thinner paper, and I think we could give it more squeeze.
It's very heavily sized too, that Stonehenge. At least I find it to be very
Is that tightening it?
water resistant.
That's a nice press. What kind of press is it? Is it a brand? I don't think so.
No, that's a Glen Alps.
It's nice.
That's a Glen Alps press. Made right here in Seattle.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try this again. And I think that the binding in our non-sensual book society serves the book ill. It serves literature ill, because literature is only newly something that is communicated over space and time. This is something that's only maybe 2,000 to 3,000 years old. And so that the idea of writing this down is really a new way of doing things for human beings. And so that's also changing the character of the communication. But I do think that if it can be brought back into the level of a round experience, in other words, if you can have sensuality be part of the communication. It's very hard for that to be when without the sound, the word is only this shape, and so it's communicated as a shape between this author, Janet, and me, reader, only as a shape. The word actually has no sound. And so that I would like that the stage was set that as soon as I pick this up, you know, I grin because it's a funny book. That means I'm serving the communication in the form of the book. And that when you pick up a book like this one, you know, this is serious. And you pick up this one, it's slick. It's sort of tasty, but you know, that's nasty. And you open it up, it is. And you open this up, and the paper is really slick. There's not much give in this. And so when you come to this, it's just black, white, and ugly type. And I think, and the story is scary. I mean, we almost blew ourselves up. And so that I think that just how something, remember people, even though they may not intellectually refer to the feelings that come through their hands, that is a very strong communication. And that's a tool that it's easy to forget that vehicle of communication. It's easy for us to forget that that's at our disposal as communicators. And that means that the book could be unpleasant to hold. It also means that a mimeographed spiral binding with metal spirals that are nasty to hold would be maybe, and just typewritten and real ugly could be just exactly right for, you know, Vietnam War poems. Just, it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be, what it has to be, as far as I'm concerned, is it has to serve the idea and the feelings that are in the writing. Much better. So we can do one more so that there are two that are nice and sharp. Okay, stick that on. Not only I advised you to know something about the theater, I also advise you to know something about the printing trades. And one reason for having book designers and artists know about books, particularly as artists, because artists buy a lot of printing, would really advise you to to know more about it and to go to your local printing trade school and take a course in offset printing and learn how the printing trade works, just so that you can be a knowledgeable purchaser of printing, so that you don't design things that are very uneconomic. So you can learn that you can do both your poster and your invitation and your business card and maybe some note paper can be all printed in one press run, so that you can learn to do all of those things. Our education has been so abstract. I mean, we've so divorced from the hand in our education, which is why most people feel like they're in jail while they're in school, up and through high school, because the education is all so abstract. One of the reasons we have a lot of problems in this country at this point is the fact that people are no longer capable of simple thinking, which is why, as an aside, we have somebody in Washington saying that they're going to balance the budget and we have the biggest deficit yet. It's the emperor's new clothes, you know? And the whole society is becoming the emperor's new clothes. So, I mean, that seems to be through all levels, is that no one understands cause and effect. And that is why working with your hands is so important. If I rip this sheet of paper, I've ripped that sheet of paper, and there's no getting around it. It's ripped. But if all I do is float around in theories, then I have no practical experience to base my idea of what ripping paper is. So that I think that one of the problems with relief etching is very similar to the colograph, is that it has a basically dirty quality to it, to the black. It's hard to get that black have much life in it. So that I think you need to build, I find, concentrate on textures. Because even though these are very different textures, there isn't, you know, there's a leveling character that is to it that is hard to jump out of. And beginning to get some help in an area like that, beginning to get a little zip. And also you'll find that a line like this will help a lot. When you draw it, don't draw it for the drawing itself, you draw it for the print it will become, which is so different from doing something like a woodcut, because in a woodcut you get exactly what you have done. But the disappointment with the woodcut is the other way around too. You're working in that 3 dimensions, and the first time you look at the print, after you've been dealing with the 3 dimensions of the block, it's always such a shock. Oh.
This concludes Claire Van Vliet's talks and demonstrations. I want to thank the students of the UW printmaking classes for supporting her visit and making this videotape possible, and Sandy Krupa of the special collections of our library for arranging her visit.
And she's got to talk again tonight and work hard again tomorrow. Where are you going tomorrow? Are you going to say Anacortes?
Yes.
Anacortes. Are you going to Spring Valley Press on Whidbey Island?
No, I'm going to visit Clifford Burke.
Oh,
Clifford and Phoenicia.
And then where to after Anacortes?
Victoria.
Victoria. Alaska. Next? No?
No, then Vancouver, and then go directly to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Montreal to Dorval.